Hit to the intended receiver, and Ole Miss celebrates an amazing win.
This season just keeps getting better and better every single week. More upsets, more things that we figure out that we had no idea about beforehand. And I absolutely love it. We're going to talk about those teams and my top 25 I got for this week. There's going to be a couple new teams in the top 25 and a couple teams that went out, and I can't wait to show you guys, so let's get right into it. Alright guys, so here's my top 25. As you can see, I moved it a lot. If you watched the video I made last week, this is very much completely different, especially the top 5 and everything from like 16 to 25. We're going to go 1 to 25, starting off with the Michigan Wolverines. They ended up playing at Nebraska this weekend. They won that game 45-7. They dominated the Cornhuskers this entire game. Nebraska isn't good, but Michigan really put them in their place, and they deserve the number 1 spot after what they showed. I really think Michigan won how they won this week was definitely on Nebraska, because Nebraska had over 300 total yards and Michigan only had like 400, so it wasn't as far as people think. But they were 1 for 3 on 4th down, which means they turned the ball over. They also threw an interception. They fumbled the ball like 3 times as well. Like, you can't do that and beat Michigan. But Michigan's defense is 100% for real. They deserve the number 1 spot. So congratulations, Wolverines and your fans. This is the first time you guys have been ranked 1 since like, what, 2006 maybe? But yeah, moving on. Number 2, I have Texas. Now Texas, they beat an undefeated ranked Kansas Jayhawks team 40-14 at home. Now granted, Kansas' starting quarterback didn't play in this game. Jalen Daniels was out, but I'm not going to take any of that away from Texas, because Texas played a complete game. They played really good, especially in the second half. They pulled away, and I'm really starting to respect the Longhorns. They're not playing down to their competition. They're blowing people out when they need to, and they're playing really good football, especially on the line of scrimmage, and I believe they're deserving of the number 2 spot. Now moving on to the number 3 spot, we have the Georgia Bulldogs. Moved them 1 to 3 just because of these close games. Every time they play a good team, they don't perform well. It's really close when it shouldn't be, and it's just ridiculous because of how good that team is. And they went into Auburn. Auburn probably has the worst offense I've seen in a while, and they were in a dogfight the entire game. They won 27-20, but for the number 1 team in the nation to only win by 7 against one of the worst SEC teams this year, especially on offense, this was one of Auburn's worst years. Offensively, probably their worst in a while, and they barely won. Like, that's not even a top 5 team to me, but I'm respecting that they are really good. Their defense is really good, and that they're figuring out on offense. So I have Georgia at the number 3 spot, and then right behind them I have Ohio State. They didn't play this week, so they stayed exactly where they were. And after them we got Penn State at the 5th spot, rounding out the top 5. They were kind of in a dogfight with Northwestern in the first half. They were 10-10 at halftime. It's so wild because Northwestern is bad, but Northwestern has a tendency of playing some of these teams like really good, like Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, like 1 a year, and they'll give them like everything. They did that last year with Ohio State, and this year I guess they gave it to Penn State in the first half, because the second half they pulled away. Penn State won 41-13. But if I was a Penn State fan, if you play a really good team like they're about to play Ohio State, you cannot like show up like they did in the first half. Drew Allard did not look like he was comfortable at all. He was making so many mistakes. They weren't able to run the ball. So I think James Franklin will be able to get all that figured out, and they'll be good for that game against Ohio State. Then number 6, I have Florida State. Florida State also didn't play. I do believe that Penn State is just a little bit better than Florida State at this point, so that's why I moved them into the top 5 and moved Florida State out. And then after them I have Washington. Now Washington didn't win their game convincingly, and I kind of went back and forth with putting them here or Oregon, but I do think Washington is the better overall team. They only won 31-24 against Arizona, which Arizona is not a good team, but Washington still performed on offense. Penix played a pretty good game, even though he didn't throw a touchdown, and their defense stopped Arizona when they needed to, and they showed that they can play some defense. So that's why I have the Huskies at the 7th spot, and then right behind them I have Oregon. They won their game against Stanford 42-6. This game was another close one, especially in the first half. It was only 14-6 at halftime, and Stanford was keeping it close, but eventually the Ducks pulled away. Bo Nix, he only had like 5 incompletions, 4 touchdowns. I feel like him and Penix are going to be the front runners for the Heisman, especially since Caleb won last year. It's going to go to one of them two, and honestly, I'm all for it. I personally think Penix is the front runner right now, and Bo Nix is right behind him, but we'll see. And speaking about Caleb Williams, at the number 9 spot, I have USC, and they rolled into Boulder, Colorado, and they won that game 48-41. That was a very high scoring game. 89 points is ridiculous. No amount of defense at all, especially in the secondaries for either of these teams. Now USC has a good front like 7. They have a good defensive line, especially with Barrett Alexander, but like that's it. If you're a good passing team and you have a good defense, you will beat USC. And it's not a slight against them, but you just will. If you have a good defense that can stop their passing attack and a decent rush, and you pass the ball on offense very well, you will beat them, and you will beat them handily. And that's why I moved them below Washington and Oregon, just because that's what they showed against a Colorado team that isn't as good as people think. I mean, they just got destroyed by Oregon last week, so I could not keep them higher in the rankings because of that. And then rounding out the top 10, I have Notre Dame. Notre Dame went on the road to play Duke. They beat Duke 21-14 in a thriller of a game. It came down to the final seconds again, back-to-back weeks. Notre Dame a nail biter, but Estime did get that touchdown at the end to win that game and to hand Duke their first loss of the season, and that's why they're in my top 10. Moving on to the number 11 spot, I have Alabama. They won their game against Mississippi State 40-17. And something funny about this game, Jalen Milroe only threw like 6 passes throughout like 3 quarters in this game. He did end up throwing 12. But that definitely does show how much they trust this guy to make those decisions and those good throws. Even though his percentage was high, he was 10 for 12. Alabama mainly kept it on the ground, especially early. And Mississippi State didn't help out at all. They threw 3 interceptions. 3 interceptions, which all led to scores. That's just what's going to happen. That's how you lose games. And if those didn't happen, this game would have been a lot closer. I didn't really see much more from Alabama. Mississippi State is not a good team at all, and those 3 turnovers played a huge factor, so they're staying at the 11th spot. And then right after them, I have Oklahoma. They won their game 50-20 against Iowa State. This is another game that was kind of close when I was watching beforehand. I can't believe Iowa State scored 20 in the first half against them. I'm not going to lie. But again, Oklahoma pulled away. They showed that they're a really good team and about to be in the top 10. They're right outside the top 10. And they're going to be there if they win their game against Texas next week in the Red River rivalry. And then the next few teams that did play this week, I have Washington State. They're sitting at the 13th spot, North Carolina at the 14th spot, and Miami at the 15th spot. And moving on at 16, we have Oregon State. Oregon State, they beat Utah. I called this, by the way, 21-7 on the back of their defense. Very defensive game, kind of boring, but it was such a good win for Oregon State after they lost to Washington State. The only big takeaway I got from this game was how good Oregon State's defense is, and they showed that they were actually for real, especially at home. Even though Utah doesn't have their starting quarterback, they need Cam Rising back to compete. I like Nate Johnson, but he is no Cam Rising. He's not good enough. They need to get healthy, and this Utah team can be dangerous when that happens. And moving on after them, at the 17th spot, I have Ole Miss. And now Ole Miss, they beat LSU 55-49 at home off of a last play overthrow in the end zone by Jaden Daniels. Again, just like the Colorado USC game, no defense was played at all. Ole Miss had 706 yards of total offense. LSU had 637 yards of total offense. It's absolutely ridiculous. And the only reason Ole Miss won this game was because LSU fumbled the ball. They had the 1 turnover, and they still had a chance to win at the end. If they didn't have the turnover, they probably would have won, or this game would have been going into overtime. Jaden Daniels, he was 27 for 36, 414 yards, 4 touchdowns. Jackson Dart, 26 for 39, 389 yards, 4 touchdowns. Absolutely insane game. I only moved Ole Miss up 4 spots because of everything I just said. It is a good win, but they're at home. I think they were favored as well, and that's just a good spot, I think, for them. And moving on, we have Utah. Utah at the 18th spot. We were already talking about them losing. Need Cam Rising back. I'm gonna say it again. But I still believe that they're better than the next couple teams like Kentucky. Kentucky, they're 5-0. They just destroyed Florida. And when I say Kentucky destroyed Florida, really Ray Davis, their running back, destroyed Florida. He had like 276 rushing yards in this game, and then Kentucky's defense played really well. I was very impressed because this team was flying under the radar. I did put them in my top 25 last week just because of that run game and defense, and then they finally got to show it this week against Florida, a defense that everyone's been telling me is really good, and they just laid it on them. So congrats to Kentucky for that win. And then moving on, we have Tennessee. They play South Carolina and they won that game 41-20. They're showing improvement, definitely. They beat South Carolina more than Georgia did. They won by 2 times their score. They won by 21 points. And they were also really balanced in the running and pass game. There was only a 1-yard difference. They had 1 more passing yard than rushing yard, which is really good. They held Spencer Rattler in check in this game, even though Joe Milton threw 2 interceptions, which that's just what you get with him. He's not that accurate, but he can make some plays. And overall, I think Tennessee deserves that 19 spot after that win. And then moving on to the top 20. At the 20 spot, I have Duke. They lost to Notre Dame, 7 points. They played a really good game. Duke played really good on defense. They were making some really good plays on offense too, especially to ice this game before that last drive when Notre Dame took the lead. All they needed was 1 stop. All they had to do was tackle Audric Estime, and they probably would have gotten the job done and won this game by 1 at home. But they're still a good team, and they're better than the next 4 in my mind. After them, we have 5-0 Mizzou. They beat Vanderbilt 38-21. Now Mizzou, I really don't think they're a good team, but they're winning, and they do have a ranked win against Kansas State, so I can't ignore that. They're at the 21 spot, and they're definitely deserving of 21 over LSU. LSU being at the 23 spot. They have 2 losses. They just lost to Ole Miss, like we talked about. And then moving on to 24, we have Fresno State. Fresno State, they've also been flying under the radar. They've won basically all their games comfortably while playing decent competition at the same time. They won their game this week 27-9 against a bad Nevada team, but they've been coasting along. They shut out Arizona State a couple weeks ago, which put up a fight against USC. So I do think this is a pretty good team. And then rounding out my top 25, I have the Maryland Terrapins. This is another team that's been flying under the radar. Their offense with Talia Tagovailoa, they're still humming. They're a really good offense. They won their game against Indiana 44-17, which again is way more impressive than even Ohio State's win over Indiana, which was 23-3. And this team is 5-0 going into that game against Ohio State. I do believe they deserve the top 25 spot, and they're going to round it out. Also, I did notice I kind of messed up the rankings. I'm going to throw those right back on the screen. I said that Tennessee was at 19. They're actually at 20. Duke is at 21. Missouri's at 22. LSU 23. Fresno State 24. Maryland 25. Then a couple teams I had sitting right on the outside looking in. Louisville, they're right behind. Like, I wanted to put them in my top 25. I just decided to put Maryland there because I think they're the better team. I think they would beat Louisville head on, which is why I gave them the nod instead. And then Texas A&M, they just beat Arkansas. They are missing their starting quarterback, but their backup, Max Johnson, he played pretty good in this game. I think they're right on the outside looking in as well, along with like Kansas State potentially. But yeah, that's going to be the end of the video, guys. Let me know if you like and enjoyed it. Also, let me know if I got anything wrong. Let me know your opinions down in the comment section below, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.